Listen closely, because what I'm about to say may finally release you from the confusion that's been weighing on your heart. You keep checking your phone. You keep replaying conversations. You keep asking yourself, if they care, why haven't they come forward? And the delay starts to feel like rejection. But hear this truth clearly. Delay is not always denial. Sometimes it is fear wearing the mask of distance. Sometimes it is a wounded soul standing at the edge of connection, trembling, unsure if love will cost them more than they can survive. They keep delaying the approach because deep inside, closeness feels dangerous. Not to you, but to the parts of them that were once hurt, ignored, or abandoned. When connection once meant pain, the nervous system learns to retreat. So they wait, they hesitate. They convince themselves that silence is safer than vulnerability. This is not laziness of love. This is survival. Understand this. An avoidant heart does not run because it doesn't feel. In fact, it runs because it feels too much without the tools to hold it. They were taught sometimes silently, sometimes harshly, that needing someone leads to loss. So they delay, hoping the feeling will pass, hoping distance will restore control, hoping they can quiet the ache without risking exposure. But here's the wisdom meant to set you free. Their delay is not your assignment to fix. Divine order never asks you to chase what is running from itself. You are not meant to shrink, wait endlessly, or prove your worth through patience that drains your soul. Love rooted in purpose does not require self-abandonment. If someone delays the approach, it is because they are standing between desire and fear is winning for now. That battle belongs to them. Your role is to remain grounded, whole, and anchored in truth. You do not beg a closed heart to open. You remain open yourself, trusting that what is meant for you will meet you with clarity, not confusion. Let this be the transformation. Fact. Stop interpreting delay as a measure of your value. Stop letting someone else's fear dictate your self-worth. The divine principle is simple: what aligns will approach in time, and what cannot meet you fully will reveal itself through distance. So breathe. Release the need to understand every silence. Choose peace over pursuit. Because when love is ready, it does not delay endlessly, it steps forward with intention, courage, and truth. Avoidant people delay the approach because intimacy triggers fear, not because interest is absent, weak, or unclear. This distinction changes everything. Many assume that if someone truly cared, they would move closer without hesitation. But avoidance does not operate on logic, it operates on the nervous system. For an avoidant individual, intimacy activates old alarm systems built long before you entered their life. Connection does not register as comfort, it registers as risk. At the core of avoidant behavior is a learned association. Closeness once equal. Fact. Emotional overwhelm, loss of autonomy, criticism, neglect, or abandonment. When the heart remembers pain, even unconsciously, it builds defenses. One of the strongest defenses is delay. Delay gives the illusion of control. It creates emotional distance while still allowing desire to exist at a safe range. They can feel without fully committing, want without fully risking, observe without being seen. This fear is not always conscious. Many avoidant individuals genuinely believe they are simply taking their time or waiting for the right moment. But underneath that reasoning is a body that tightens when closeness increases. The moment emotional intimacy becomes possible when conversations deepen, expectations rise, or vulnerability is required, the internal system reacts. Anxiety increases, thoughts spiral, questions surface. What if I lose myself? What if I disappoint them? What if they see my flaws and leave? What if I get attached and it ends painfully? Because they were never fact. Ought how to sit safely in emotional closeness. The instinct is to pull back. Delay becomes a way to regulate fear. It buys time for the nervous system to calm down. It reduces the intensity of emotions that feel too big to manage. From the outside, this looks like indifference or lack of effort. From the inside, it feels like trying not to drown. It is important to understand that avoidant fear is not a lack of attachment, it is attachment mixed with threat. They often care deeply, but caring itself feels destabilizing. Love activates dependency needs they learn to suppress. Needing someone feels unsafe because at some point needing was not met with care, so they learned independence as protection. Emotional self-reliance became survival, and intimacy now feels like surrendering armor. This is why they may show interest in subtle ways while still delaying direct approach. They watch, they think, they feel from a distance. They may engage intellectually but avoid emotional exposure. Fact. They may want closeness but freeze when action is required. The delay is not manipulation, it is hesitation born from fear of emotional consequences they do not feel equipped to handle. Another layer of this fear is the fear of being responsible for another person's emotions. Intimacy implies impact. It means your actions matter. For avoidant individuals, this responsibility feels heavy. They fear being needed, not because they lack compassion, but because they fear failing at it. If they approach and form a bond, expectations follow, and expectations feel like pressure. So they delay, hoping the feelings will settle, hoping certainty will magically appear, hoping fear will disappear on its own. But fear rarely dissolves without safety and awareness. Until they learn that closeness can exist without loss of self, delay remains the default response. For the person waiting on the other side, this dynamic is painful and confusing. Silence feels personal. Distance feels like rejection. But fact, the truth is more complex. The delay is about their relationship with intimacy, not your worth, attractiveness, or value. You are not being avoided because you are lacking, you are being delayed because closeness awakens something unresolved within them. Recognizing this truth does not mean tolerating indefinite uncertainty. It means understanding the psychology without internalizing blame. Fear-driven delay is a signal, not an invitation to chase, convince, or overextend. It is simply evidence that intimacy feels unsafe for them right now. When you understand that avoidance is rooted in fear rather than disinterest, you stop personalizing the pause. You stop shrinking yourself to make someone feel safer. And you begin to see clearly. Intimacy requires courage, and not everyone is ready to step forward, even when the desire is real. Delay is a protective strategy learned from past emotional wounds and unmet needs, not a random behavior or a sign of emotional coldness. It is a survival fact. Response shaped over time, formed in environments where emotional expression did not lead to safety, comfort, or consistency. When someone grows up or repeatedly experiences relationships where vulnerability was ignored, punished, or met with unpredictability, the psyche adapts. It learns that approaching emotionally is risky and that holding back is safer. In early relational experiences, many avoidant individuals were required to become self-sufficient too soon. They may have had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, overwhelmed, critical, or inconsistent. As a result, their needs were not reliably met. The child learned that asking for comfort did not guarantee comfort. Expressing fear, sadness, or dependence often led to disappointment. Over time, the nervous system absorbed a powerful lesson. Do not reach out, do not expect too much, do not depend. This lesson does not disappear in adulthood, it becomes refined. Delay replaces withdrawal. Silence replaces rejection. Emotio, fact. Now distance replaces confrontation. When intimacy presents itself later in life, the body remembers what the mind may not consciously recall. The moment closeness begins to form, old emotional memories activate. The person may not think, "I was hurt before," but they feel a vague sense of unease, tension, or pressure. That sensation is enough to trigger protective behavior. Delay is one of the safest protections because it avoids outright rejection while still preventing vulnerability. It allows the person to stay emotionally unexposed while maintaining the possibility of connection. They can tell themselves they are being cautious, rational, or independent, when in truth they are avoiding reactivation of old pain. The strategy worked once, so the nervous system keeps using it. Unmet needs play a central role in this pattern. Many avoidant individuals learned that their emotional needs were inconvenient or excessive. They internalized the belief that needing closeness leads to burden, fact, NG others, or being disappointed. As adults, they suppress needs so deeply that intimacy feels unfamiliar. When someone offers closeness, it awakens needs they have spent years ignoring. That awakening feels overwhelming. Delay becomes a way to keep those needs asleep. There is also a grief embedded in this behavior. Delay protects not only from potential future pain, but also from old, unresolved loss. If someone approaches intimacy, they risk re-experiencing abandonment, rejection, or emotional deprivation. The nervous system would rather avoid than reopen wounds that were never healed. So they slow down, create space, and stay in control. This protective strategy is often invisible to others because it is subtle. The person may appear calm, logical, and detached, but inside there is often conflict. One part wants connection, warmth, and closeness. Another part remembers pain and insists on safety at all costs. Delay is the compromise between these two parts. It allows desire to exist, without fully surrendering to it. Importantly, this strategy once served a purpose. It helped the person survive emotionally. It reduced disappointment. It preserved autonomy. It prevented further harm, but what once protected them can now limit them. Delay may prevent pain, but it also prevents depth, intimacy, and mutual growth. For those on the receiving end, it is easy to misinterpret delay as lack of care or emotional unavailability. But the truth is more layered. The avoidant individual is not choosing distance because they do not value connection. They are choosing distance because closeness triggers memories of unmet needs that were never fulfilled. The delay is not about withholding love, it is about protecting wounds that still ache. Understanding this does not mean excusing behavior that causes confusion or emotional neglect. It means recognizing that delay is not personal, strategic, or cruel. It is conditioned. It is learned. It is the language of a nervous system that leads. Learn to survive without consistent emotional support. When someone delays the approach, they are often unconsciously asking one question: will this cost me more than I can handle? Until that fear is addressed and those unmet needs are acknowledged and healed, delay remains their shield. Avoidance often comes from a deep fear of losing control, independence, or self-identity. For many avoidant individuals, control is not about dominance over others, it is about self-preservation. Control represents safety. Independence represents survival. Identity represents the one thing they learned they could rely on when emotional closeness felt unreliable. When intimacy threatens these pillars, the instinct is to delay, distance, or disengage. In early life or formative relationships, avoidant individuals often learn that closeness came with expectations, demands, or emotional entanglements that felt suffocating. They may have experienced caregivers or partners who were intrusive, overly NDERT, emotionally unpredictable, or boundary violating. In such environments, connection did not feel mutual, it felt consuming. To cope, the individual learned to create space, protect autonomy, and maintain inner control as a way to stay emotionally intact. Over time, independence became more than a preference, it became an identity. Being self-reliant, emotionally contained, and unbothered was not just a behavior, it was a sense of self. Vulnerability threatened this identity. Intimacy asked them to soften, to rely, to share inner territory that had been carefully guarded. Approaching someone emotionally felt like handing over the keys to a life they worked hard to stabilize. This is why approach is delayed. Approaching requires surrendering a degree of control. It means allowing uncertainty, emotional influence, and mutual impact. For avoidant individuals, this loss of control feels dangerous. They fear being pulled into dynamics where they must adjust, accommodate, or compromise in ways that erase them. Even healthy intimacy can feel like a threat if past experiences taught them that closeness equals self-loss. The fear of losing independence is particularly strong. Many avoidant individuals equate independence with freedom and safety. They learn to meet their own needs because relying on others felt unreliable or disappointing. Intimacy, however, introduces interdependence. It requires emotional availability and responsiveness. For someone whose nervous system is wired for self-containment, this feels like giving up hard-won freedom. The delay then becomes a way to preserve autonomy. By staying at a distance, they remain in control of their time, emotions, and boundaries. They can engage on their own terms, retreat when overwhelmed, and avoid the vulnerability that comes with full presence. Delay keeps the self intact, at least as they understand it. Fear of identity loss also plays a subtle role. Many avoidant individuals are unsure who they are within close. NS. They know who they are alone. They know how to function without emotional reliance. But intimacy asks them to integrate another person into their inner world. That integration feels destabilizing. Questions arise. Who am I if I need someone? Who am I if I change for a relationship? What parts of me will I have to give up? Rather than confront these questions, the nervous system chooses avoidance. Delay postpones the identity challenge. It allows them to remain in familiar territory where the self feels defined and protected. Approaching would require emotional growth, adaptation, and trust things that feel unsafe without prior experience of secure closeness. This does not mean avoidant individuals do not desire connection. Often, they deeply want intimacy but fear the cost. They imagine closeness as losing themselves rather than expanding themselves. Without a model of healthy interdependence, intimacy feels like erasure rather than enrichment for those waiting on the other side. Fact E. This delay can feel confusing and painful. It may look like disinterest or emotional unavailability, but beneath it lies a struggle between desire and self-protection. The avoidant individual is not rejecting the other person, they are defending their sense of self. Understanding this dynamic helps remove personalization. The delay is not a statement about your value or worth. It is a reflection of their internal relationship with control, independence, and identity. Until they learn that intimacy does not require self-abandonment, delay remains their way of staying safe. Approach requires trust not just in another person, but in the belief that closeness can exist without loss. When that belief is missing, distance feels like the only option. The silence and distance you experience are internal battles, not reflections of your worth. This is one of the hardest truths to accept because the human mind instinctively personalizes absence. When someone pulls away, delays, or goes quiet, the first question that arises is, what did I do wrong? But in avoidant psychology, the space you feel is rarely about you. It is about what is happening inside them, conflicts you cannot see, fears they may not fully understand, and emotional processes that existed long before you entered their life. Avoidant individuals often experience intimacy as a trigger rather than a comfort. When closeness increases, their internal world becomes noisy. Thoughts race. The nervous system shifts into self-protection. They may feel overwhelmed, pressured, or exposed without knowing exactly why. Instead of communicating this turmoil, they retreat into silence. Distance becomes a way to regulate internal chaos. It is not a punishment, and it is not a calculated withdrawal. It is an attempt to regain emotional balance. From the outside, this silence feels like indifference. From the inside, it feels like survival. Many avoidant individuals were never taught how to name or share emotional overwhelm. In their early experiences, expressing emotional distress may have been ignored, minimized, or met with discomfort. As a result, they learn to process everything internally. When intimacy activates unresolved feelings, they withdraw to manage them alone. This internal struggle often includes shame. Avoidant individuals may feel something is wrong with them for needing space or feeling overwhelmed by closeness. Rather than risk being seen as weak, needy, or inadequate, they disappear emotionally. Silence becomes a way to hide internal confusion. The distance you feel is not rejection, it is concealment. It is also important to understand that avoidant silence is rarely calm. It is not peace. It is often filled with tension, rumination, and self-justification. They may think about you often while still remaining distant. They may care deeply while convincing themselves that distance is necessary. This contradiction creates guilt, which further complicates their ability to approach. T leads to more avoidance, not less. For the person on the receiving end, this dynamic is destabilizing. Silence invites interpretation. Distance invites self-doubt. You replay interactions, analyze words, and search for mistakes. Over time, you may begin to question your attractiveness, your value, or your emotional needs. This is where harm occurs, not because of intentional cruelty, but because of unspoken internal battles spilling into relational space. The most important truth here is that their internal struggle existed before you. You did not cause it. You did not awaken it. You simply activated a pattern that was already there. Intimacy brings unresolved issues to the surface. When someone cannot tolerate that exposure, they retreat. Understanding this helps separate behavior from meaning. Distance does not mean you are unlovable. Silence does not mean you are unwanted. It means the person does not yet have the capacity to stay present while emotionally activated. They're nervous. System chooses withdrawal because it lacks safer tools. This does not mean the pain you feel is invalid. It is real. Confusion hurts. Waiting hurts. But pain does not equal responsibility. You are not required to carry someone else's internal conflict. Recognizing that their distance is internal allows you to stop internalizing it. When you stop personalizing silence, you regain your grounding. You stop chasing explanations. You stop shrinking to feel chosen. You begin to see clearly. Connection requires mutual emotional availability. If someone cannot meet you there, it is not because you are too much or not enough. It is because they are fighting battles they have not yet learned how to face openly. Distance is information, not a verdict on your worth. It tells you where someone is emotionally, not who you are. When you hold this truth, you protect your self-esteem from being eroded by someone else's unresolved inner world. The most empowering shift is this. Instead of asking why am I not enough for them to approach, you begin asking, is this level of emotional availability enough for me? That shift returns your power. It reminds you that your worth is not measured by someone's capacity to face intimacy. Healing begins when fear is replaced with safety, patience, and emotional self-responsibility. Avoidant patterns do not dissolve through pressure, pursuit, or explanation. They soften when the nervous system learns that closeness no longer equals danger. This shift does not happen through force. It happens through experiences of safety, both internal and relational, that gradually rewire how intimacy is perceived. At the center of avoidance is fear. Fear of engulfment, fear of dependence, fear of loss, fear of emotional overwhelm. These fears live in the body more than in conscious thought. This is why logic alone cannot undo avoidance. Telling someone there's nothing to be afraid of does not calm a nervous system trained by years of emotional unpredictability. Fact, why safety must be felt, not argued. Patience plays a critical role, but not the kind of patience that requires self-abandonment. Healthy patience respects pacing while honoring boundaries. It allows space without enabling indefinite distance. Avoidant healing requires time for trust to develop slowly, through consistency rather than intensity. Sudden emotional demands can feel invasive. Gradual, predictable connection helps the nervous system stay regulated. Safety also begins internally. Avoidant individuals often rely on external distance to regulate emotions because they lack internal tools. Healing involves learning how to stay present with emotional discomfort without immediately withdrawing. This includes recognizing bodily signals, naming emotions, and developing self-soothing strategies that do not rely on avoidance. When someone can regulate themselves internally, closeness no longer feels overwhelming. Emotional self-responsibility is the turning point. This means recognizing, fact, that fear-driven behaviors impact others and choosing to take ownership of those patterns. Healing does not mean forcing oneself into intimacy before readiness. It means becoming aware of avoidance instead of acting unconsciously from it. Awareness creates choice. Choice creates change. Self-responsibility also means understanding that past wounds explain behavior but do not excuse harm. Avoidant individuals must learn to communicate rather than disappear. Silence may feel protective, but it transfers confusion and pain to the other person. Healing involves learning to say, I need space, instead of creating distance without explanation. This preserves safety on both sides. For those in relationship with avoidant individuals, safety does not mean tolerating neglect or uncertainty indefinitely. Safety is mutual. It includes clarity, emotional honesty, and respect for needs. Supporting healing does not require sacrificing one's own emotional well-being. In fact, secure boundaries often, provide the greatest sense of safety for avoidant individuals because predictability reduces anxiety. Replacing fear with safety also requires relearning what intimacy actually is. Many avoidant individuals associate closeness with loss of autonomy. Healing involves experiencing intimacy that allows individuality to coexist with connection. When independence is respected, closeness becomes less threatening. This is how the nervous system learns that intimacy does not erase the self, it supports it. Another critical aspect of healing is patience with oneself. Avoidant patterns developed over years. They do not disappear overnight. Shame only reinforces avoidance. Compassion creates space for growth. Healing requires acknowledging fear without identifying with it. Fear can exist without controlling behavior. Consistency is more powerful than intensity. Safe connection is built through small, reliable interactions rather than emotional highs and lows. Predictability teaches the nervous system that closeness is stable, not chaotic. Over time, fear loses its grip. Ultimately, healing is not about becoming fearless. It is about becoming safe enough to stay present with fear. When safety increases, delay decreases. When emotional responsibility replaces automatic withdrawal, approach becomes possible. Healing begins the moment fear is no longer in control of the relationship, but neither is avoidance. Keynote 6. Avoidant delay often increases when emotional connection starts to feel real, mutual, and irreversible. When emotional connection shifts from possibility to reality, avoidant patterns often intensify. At the beginning, when interest is abstract and outcomes are uncertain, avoidant individuals may feel relatively comfortable. There is room to imagine, observe, and engage without consequence. But the moment connection becomes mutual, when feelings are mirrored, attention is consistent, and emotional significance is undeniable, the internal alarm activates. What once felt manageable now feels binding. This is because real connection introduces permanence. It moves the relationship from "I can leave any time" to "this matters." For avoidant individuals, mattering carries weight. It introduces emotional stakes they are not prepared to hold. When something becomes real, it can no longer be controlled through distance or ambiguity. The possibility of loss becomes tangible. The responsibility of presence becomes unavoidable. Delay becomes the last line of defense against emotional consequence. Mutuality is especially triggering. When feelings are one-sided or unclear, the avoidant individual retains control. They can regulate closeness by deciding when to engage and when to pull back. But when the other person becomes emotionally available, responsive, or invested, the balance shifts. Now there is expectation, not necessarily spoken, but felt. That expectation creates pressure, even if the other person is not demanding anything. This pressure is internal. It is the pressure of being seen, chosen, and emotionally impactful. Avoidant individuals often struggle with being the emotional anchor for someone else. When they realize they matter to you, fear intensifies. Questions surface. What if I can't show up consistently? What if I disappoint them? What if I feel trapped? Rather than confront these fears directly, the nervous system chooses distance. This is why delay often appears paradoxical. The closer the bond feels, the more the avoidant person pulls away. This can be deeply confusing for the other person, who experiences the growing connection as a signal of safety, not danger. But for the avoidant nervous system, safety was never associated with closeness. Safety was associated with autonomy and emotional self-containment. Irreversibility is another hidden trigger. Early stages of connection feel reversible. Silence can be explained away. Distance can be justified. But once emotional truth is acknowledged through vulnerability, intimacy or shared meaning, there is no easy return to detachment. Avoidant individuals fear crossing thresholds they cannot uncross. Delay becomes a way to pause time, to avoid stepping into a reality that requires emotional follow-through. This fear does not mean they want to lose the connection. Often they are trying to preserve it by not advancing it. In their internal logic, staying distant feels safer than risking collapse. They believe that if they delay, they can prevent damage. Unfortunately, this strategy often creates the very loss they fear. Another layer is fear of emotional dependency. When connection becomes real, dependency becomes possible. Even healthy interdependence can feel threatening to someone who learned early that needing others leads to pain. The idea of emotionally relying on someone or having someone rely on them activates deep discomfort. Delay helps maintain emotional independence, even at the cost of closeness. There is also a fear of exposure. Real connected section reveals inner layers. It brings flaws, fears, and vulnerabilities into view. Avoidant individuals often carry shame about their emotional limitations. When connection becomes real, they fear being exposed as inadequate, emotionally unavailable, or incapable of sustaining intimacy. Distance protects self-image. For the person waiting, this stage is often the most painful. Everything feels aligned, yet progress stalls. The delay feels unjustified because emotional evidence is already there. This is where many people internalize the avoidance, believing they did something wrong by caring too much or opening up. But the truth is that caring is what made the connection real, and realness is what triggered the delay. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it reframes the experience. The delay is not caused by emotional closeness being wrong. It is caused by closeness challenging unresolved fears. This does not obligate anyone to wait indefinitely, but it does clarify what is penning beneath the surface. When emotional connection becomes real, avoidant delay is a signal of fear meeting truth. It is the nervous system standing at the edge of intimacy, unsure whether it has the capacity to step forward. So as you leave this moment, remember this. Delay does not define your worth. Distance does not diminish your value, and someone else's fear is never a verdict on your lovability. Walk forward grounded, patient, and rooted in truth, knowing that what is meant to meet you will do so with clarity and courage. Thank you for allowing this wisdom to meet your heart today. May you carry it gently, live it boldly, and choose peace over confusion. Goodbye, and may your path ahead be guided by strength, self respect, and calm assurance.